The moment the engine came back to life, a secret worth billions of dollars woke up with it. The annual Hayes Automotive Heritage Gala drew collectors, executives, and journalists from across the country. Hundreds of guests filled the polished exhibition hall in downtown Chicago, admiring rare vehicles worth more than most homes. Crystal lights reflected across chrome fenders. Cameras flashed. Conversations echoed beneath the vaulted ceiling. At the center of it all stood Madison Hayes, the 35-year-old CEO of Hayes Automotive Group, smiling confidently beside the crown jewel of the event, a one-of-a-kind prototype sports car built by the company's founder nearly 40 years earlier. The vehicle was more than a collector's item. It was a symbol of the company's legacy. At least, it was supposed to be. Because when Madison turned the key in front of the crowd, nothing happened. The engine remained silent. A murmur spread through the room. Madison tried again. Nothing. Her smile tightened. Several company engineers rushed forward. They checked connections. They examined diagnostics. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. The car remained dead. Guests began whispering. Reporters lifted cameras. The embarrassment was becoming impossible to hide. Near the back of the hall, Cole Bennett watched quietly. At 43 years old, the single father had spent most of his life around engines. He owned a small repair shop outside the city and had been hired as temporary technical support for the event. His denim work shirt and worn boots stood out among expensive suits and designer dresses. Most people barely noticed him. Cole preferred it that way. One engineer shook his head. "We cannot figure it out." Another sighed. "The system is locked." Madison crossed her arms. "You are telling me nobody can start this car?" Silence answered her. Then someone pointed toward Cole. "What about him?" Several people turned. Madison followed their gaze and saw a mechanic standing beside a toolbox. For a moment, she looked amused. "You?" she asked. Cole walked forward calmly. "I can take a look." A few guests laughed. Madison studied him. There was something unexpectedly steady about his expression. No arrogance. No nervousness. Just quiet confidence. She smiled playfully. "All right, mechanic." The crowd leaned closer. Madison raised an eyebrow. "Fix it, and I will kiss you." Laughter rippled through the hall. Cameras immediately pointed toward them. Cole heard the jokes. He heard the whispers. But he simply nodded once. "I think your car deserves more attention than I do." The response earned a few surprised smiles. Then he opened the driver's door and sat inside. The hall gradually grew quieter. Cole examined the dashboard. The wiring looked untouched. The battery system was healthy. Yet something felt wrong. Machines always left clues. You just had to listen. His eyes moved across the controls until he noticed a tiny irregularity near the ignition housing. A small metal plate sat slightly out of alignment. Almost invisible. Almost. He carefully removed it. Behind the plate was an old mechanical switch that did not appear on any original design schematics. Cole frowned. Why would someone hide that? He pressed the switch. A faint click echoed somewhere deep inside the vehicle. Several guests exchanged confused looks. Madison stepped closer. "Did you find something?" Cole did not answer immediately. Instead, he inserted the key and turned it. The prototype roared to life instantly. The crowd erupted into applause. But the engine was not the only thing that activated. Beneath the center console, a hidden compartment slowly slid open. Inside rested a black storage drive sealed inside a steel case. The applause died. The room fell silent. And for the first time all evening, Madison Hayes looked genuinely shocked. For several seconds, nobody moved. The hidden compartment remained open beneath the center console of the prototype, while the engine purred smoothly through the exhibition hall. The applause had vanished. In its place came silence. Reporters lowered their cameras. Executives exchanged confused glances. Even the musicians performing near the entrance seemed distracted by what had just happened. Madison Hayes stared at the steel case resting inside the compartment. Her expression had changed completely. The playful confidence she carried earlier was gone. "What is that?" one board member asked. Nobody answered. Cole Bennett stepped away from the driver's seat and looked toward Madison. "I think that question belongs to you." Madison slowly approached the vehicle. The bright showroom lights reflected across the polished black paint as she carefully removed the case from the compartment. It was surprisingly heavy. Dust covered portions of the metal surface. Most unsettling of all was a small engraved symbol stamped into one corner. Several older executives immediately recognized it. Their faces revealed more than their words ever could. Madison noticed. "Why do you all look like that?" Still nobody answered. Then another voice entered the conversation. "Because that symbol was supposed to disappear 40 years ago." The speaker was Trevor Kane. As Chief Technology Officer of Hayes Automotive Group, Trevor rarely looked uncomfortable. Tonight was different. His jaw tightened as he stared at the case. Madison turned toward him. "You know what this is?" Trevor forced a small smile. "Probably an old engineering archive. Nothing important." Cole watched him carefully. The answer came too quickly, too rehearsed. Machines were not the only things that left clues. People did too. Madison frowned. "If it is nothing important, why do you suddenly look nervous?" A few guests quietly laughed. Trevor did not. The atmosphere shifted. Reporters sensed a story. Cameras lifted once again. Trevor immediately stepped forward. "This is neither the time nor place for speculation." Madison looked down at the steel case. "Then perhaps we should find out exactly what it contains." Trevor opened his mouth to object, but stopped himself. Around them, executives began whispering. Investors exchanged concerned looks. Something larger than a simple mechanical discovery was unfolding. Cole noticed an old serial number attached to the side of the case. The format looked unusual. Not modern, not corporate, almost personal. Madison carefully wiped away years of dust. Beneath it appeared a small engraved inscription. "Founder Archive, property of Richard Hayes." The room became even quieter. Richard Hayes had founded the company decades earlier. His story appeared in business schools and industry magazines across the country. According to company history, many of his original records had been lost after a warehouse fire shortly before his death. Madison looked up slowly. "That is impossible." Trevor folded his arms. "Exactly. Which means this cannot be authentic." Yet his voice lacked conviction. Cole could hear it. So could Madison. A reporter raised her hand. "Miss Hayes, if this archive truly belonged to the founder, does that mean important company records may have been hidden?" Trevor answered before Madison could speak. "Absolutely not." The response came so fast that several heads turned toward him. Cole noticed a bead of sweat forming near Trevor's temple despite the cool temperature inside the hall. "Interesting. Very interesting." Madison held the steel case tightly. "The gala is over," she announced. "Everyone, thank you for attending." Confused murmurs spread across the crowd. Within minutes, guests began leaving. Reporters reluctantly packed equipment. Security escorted visitors toward the exits. Eventually, only a handful of people remained near the prototype. Madison looked at Cole. "You found it." Cole shrugged. "The car found it." For the first time that evening, Madison smiled. Not the smile of a CEO managing a crowd. A genuine one. Then she looked back at the steel case. "Tomorrow morning," she said quietly, "I am opening this." Trevor's expression darkened. And as the exhibition hall lights dimmed one section at a time, Cole had the unmistakable feeling that someone desperately hoped that case would never be opened at all. The following morning arrived gray and quiet over Chicago. Rain tapped softly against the glass walls of Hayes Automotive headquarters as executives hurried through marble hallways carrying tablets and coffee cups. Rumors from the gala had already spread throughout the company. Employees whispered in elevators. Reporters waited outside the building. Everyone wanted answers. On the top floor, inside a private conference room overlooking the city skyline, Madison Hayes placed the steel case at the center of a long walnut table. The room smelled faintly of fresh coffee and polished wood. Around her sat a small group of trusted executives. Trevor Kane occupied a chair near the far end of the table. His expression remained composed, but Madison noticed how often he checked his phone. Across from her sat Cole Bennett. He felt slightly out of place among billion-dollar executives in expensive suits, yet somehow he appeared more comfortable than any of them. "Ready?" Madison asked. No one answered immediately. Finally, she inserted a small key recovered from inside the compartment and turned it. A soft click echoed through the room. The lid slowly opened. Inside rested a storage drive, several folders of yellowed documents, and a leather notebook worn by decades of age. For a moment, nobody spoke. Madison carefully lifted the notebook. On the first page appeared a handwritten signature. Richard Hayes. Her grandfather. The founder. Her eyes widened. "This is real." Trevor leaned forward. "That proves nothing." Madison ignored him and turned another page. Notes filled every line. Design sketches. business plans, manufacturing ideas, personal observations. The handwriting matched authenticated documents preserved in the company archives. There was no question. These pages belonged to Richard Hayes. As Madison continued reading, something else caught her attention. Certain names appeared repeatedly throughout the notebook. One name more than any other. Samuel Carter. Madison frowned. Who is Samuel Carter? Several executives exchanged confused looks. Nobody knew. Trevor immediately answered. Probably an old supplier. His response came too quickly. Again. Cole noticed. Again. Madison did too. She continued reading. The farther she progressed, the stranger the entries became. Richard repeatedly referred to Samuel Carter as his partner, his equal, his friend. Yet company history contained no mention of such a person. This makes no sense, Madison whispered. My grandfather built this company alone. That is what the history books say. Cole replied quietly. Madison looked up. Their eyes met briefly. There was no accusation in his expression, only curiosity, the kind that refused to ignore missing pieces. Madison opened one of the folders. Inside were photographs from nearly 40 years earlier. Factory openings, prototype testing, award ceremonies. In photo after photo, Richard Hayes stood beside another man, a man Madison had never seen before. Samuel Carter. The room grew silent. Trevor shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Old photographs do not change anything. Madison studied him. You seem very eager to dismiss all of this. Trevor forced a smile. I am trying to keep everyone focused on facts. These are facts. The response surprised even Madison. Her voice carried a firmness that had been absent all morning. Outside, thunder rolled across the city skyline. Rain streaked down the windows. The atmosphere inside the room felt heavier by the minute. Then Cole picked up a photograph from the bottom of the stack. Something written on the back caught his attention. He turned it toward Madison. Her eyes widened immediately. Beneath the photograph appeared a handwritten note from Richard Hayes himself. If anything happens to me, Samuel deserves half of everything we built together. The room fell completely silent. Even Trevor stopped talking. Madison slowly lowered the photograph. For 35 years, she had believed she understood the story behind her family's empire. In less than 24 hours, that story was beginning to unravel. And judging by the tension growing on Trevor's face, someone inside the company had known the truth all along. The conference room remained quiet long after the photograph was placed on the table. Rain continued sliding down the glass walls of Hayes Automotive headquarters, turning the Chicago skyline into a blur of gray and silver. Nobody seemed interested in the weather anymore. Every person in the room was staring at the image of Richard Hayes standing beside the mysterious Samuel Carter. For decades, company history had celebrated one founder. Now evidence suggested there had been two. Madison Hayes leaned back slowly in her chair. The photograph felt heavier than paper should. Find everything we have on Samuel Carter, she said. Several executives nodded immediately. Trevor Kane did not. He remained unusually still. This is becoming a distraction, he said. From what? Madison asked. Trevor folded his hands. From running a company. Madison raised an eyebrow. Learning the truth about how this company was built seems relevant to me. Nobody disagreed. An hour later, most of the executives had left to begin searching company archives. Only Madison, Trevor, and Cole remained in the conference room. The leather notebook lay open between them. Cole continued studying several engineering sketches Richard Hayes had drawn decades earlier. Something about them caught his attention. These designs are familiar, he said quietly. Madison looked over. How? Cole pointed toward a specific component. Because my father worked on systems like these. Trevor immediately interrupted. That technology is obsolete. Cole ignored him. Maybe, but the engineering philosophy is not. Madison moved closer to examine the page. Their shoulders nearly aligned over the notebook. For the first time since the gala, she noticed details she had overlooked before. Cole's observations were thoughtful, precise. He never tried to impress anyone. He simply noticed things other people missed. What are you seeing? She asked. Cole traced a line across one of the diagrams. These designs were not created by one person. Trevor sighed loudly. Now we are inventing stories. Cole calmly looked up. No, I am looking at evidence. The response landed harder than Trevor expected. Madison noticed the irritation flash across his face. Then her phone rang. She glanced at the screen. It was the head archivist. Tell me you found something. A pause followed. Then the archivist answered. Madison's expression changed immediately. You are serious? Another pause. Bring everything to my office. She ended the call and stood. What happened? Cole asked. Madison looked directly at him. The archivist found payroll records from 38 years ago. Trevor shifted in his seat. And Madison did not look away from him. Samuel Carter was not a supplier. Silence. He was officially listed as co-founder of Hayes Automotive. The room froze. Even the sound of rain seemed distant. Trevor slowly stood. Records can be inaccurate. 38 years of records. Madison asked. Multiple tax filings? Corporate registrations? Trevor had no answer. Cole watched him carefully. The man looked less confident by the minute. An uncomfortable truth was beginning to surface. Somebody had removed Samuel Carter from the story. Somebody had erased him. The question was why. Later that evening, after most employees had gone home, Madison stood alone in her office reviewing documents spread across her desk. The city lights glowed beyond the windows. A soft knock interrupted her concentration. She looked up. Cole stood in the doorway holding 2 cups of coffee. You look like you could use this. Madison smiled despite herself. You always rescue broken things. Cole handed her a cup. Only the ones worth fixing. For a moment, both laughed quietly. The tension eased. Then Madison's smile faded as she looked back toward the documents. Someone stole part of my family's history. Cole looked at the city beyond the glass. Maybe. Madison frowned. Maybe. Cole nodded. Or maybe someone was afraid of what that history would reveal. The words settled heavily between them. Because deep down, both were beginning to suspect the missing co-founder was only the beginning of a much larger secret. The next several days passed in a blur of research, unanswered questions, and growing tension. Every new document seemed to create 2 new mysteries. Madison Hayes spent hours buried in company archives while executives scrambled to explain records that should have been impossible to ignore. Yet the deeper they searched, the clearer one fact became. Samuel Carter had not merely helped build Hayes Automotive. He had been essential to it. His name appeared on early patents. His signature appeared on engineering approvals. His contributions filled thousands of pages. Somehow, over time, nearly all public references to him had vanished. On Thursday evening, Madison sat alone in a secure records room beneath headquarters. Metal shelves stretched from floor to ceiling. Boxes filled with decades of company history surrounded her. The fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead. Across the table sat Cole Bennett, reviewing engineering blueprints from the early years of the company. Hours had passed without either noticing. Most people would have gone home by now, Madison said while organizing another stack of documents. Cole smiled faintly. Most people are smarter than I am. Madison laughed quietly. The sound echoed through the nearly empty archive room. No, most people would have stopped caring. Cole looked down at a faded blueprint. Maybe that is the difference. Madison studied him for a moment. The more time she spent around him, the more unusual he seemed. He never appeared impressed by wealth. Never asked for favors. Never tried to position himself closer to power. He simply cared about finding the truth. That quality had become surprisingly rare in her world. Suddenly, Cole froze. Wait. Madison immediately noticed the change in his expression. What is it? He slid a blueprint across the table. At first glance it looked ordinary. Another vehicle design from nearly 40 years ago. Then Madison saw a handwritten note in the margin. Not from Richard Hayes. From Samuel Carter. Her pulse quickened. Turn the page. Cole carefully unfolded an attached document hidden beneath the blueprint. Both stared in silence. The page contained a list of storage locations. Workshops. Warehouses. Testing facilities. Most no longer existed. One location, however, remained active. Madison recognized the address immediately. That cannot be right. Cole looked up. You know it. She nodded slowly. It is an old research center outside Milwaukee. Does the company still own it? Technically. Madison frowned. But it has been abandoned for years. A strange feeling settled over the room. The address appeared repeatedly throughout Samuel's notes. More than any other location. As if something important had been left there. Just then, Madison's phone buzzed. The screen displayed a message from Trevor Kane. Emergency board meeting tomorrow morning. Attendance required. Madison sighed. Perfect timing. Cole glanced at the message. Bad news. Trevor only calls emergency meetings when he wants control of the narrative. The answer seemed to confirm something both were already beginning to suspect. Trevor was not merely uncomfortable. He was worried. Very worried. The following morning, the boardroom atmosphere felt colder than usual. Executives filled every seat. Financial analysts attended remotely on large screens. Trevor stood near the front of the room, delivering a presentation. The recent speculation surrounding company history has created unnecessary uncertainty, he said. Our focus must remain on future growth. Madison listened quietly. Then Trevor displayed a slide containing projected financial losses. We should suspend further investigation until independent verification can be completed. Several board members nodded. It sounded reasonable, professional, safe. Yet something felt wrong. Cole sat near the back of the room as an invited consultant. He noticed Trevor carefully avoiding one subject. Samuel Carter. The omission was impossible to ignore. Finally, Madison raised her hand. Why are you refusing to discuss the co-founder? Trevor paused. Just briefly, but long enough. Every person in the room noticed. Because, Trevor replied, some stories are better left in the past. The room fell silent. And in that moment, Madison realized this was no longer about forgotten history. Someone was actively trying to keep the truth buried. The board meeting ended with more questions than answers. Executives filed out of the room in uneasy silence while Trevor Kane remained behind, speaking quietly with several senior board members. Madison noticed how often he glanced in her direction. It was not the look of a man protecting a company. It was the look of a man protecting something else. Outside, Chicago was wrapped in a cold afternoon drizzle. Gray clouds hung low above the city as Madison and Cole stepped into a private elevator descending toward the underground parking garage. Neither spoke for several moments. The silence felt thoughtful rather than uncomfortable. Finally, Madison looked at him. You think Trevor knows more than he is admitting? Cole nodded. I think he is afraid of where this leads. That is not the same thing. Sometimes it is. The elevator doors opened. They walked toward Madison's vehicle. As fluorescent lights reflected off polished concrete floors. The Milwaukee facility, Cole said. We need to see it. Madison hesitated only briefly. Tomorrow. Early the next morning, they drove north through Wisconsin beneath a pale sky streaked with morning sunlight. The farther they traveled from the city, the more the landscape changed. Glass towers gave way to farmland. Highways narrowed into quiet roads lined with pine trees. By noon, they arrived at the abandoned research center. The property sat behind an aging chain-link fence surrounded by acres of overgrown grass. A faded Hayes automotive sign still hung near the entrance. Time had nearly erased it. This place looks forgotten, Madison said. Cole stared at the building. Maybe that was the point. They entered using access credentials Madison still possessed as CEO. Inside, dust coated nearly every surface. Empty desks sat frozen in time. Filing cabinets lined the walls. Old testing equipment remained exactly where employees had left it years earlier. The entire facility felt less abandoned than hidden, as if someone wanted the world to stop looking. For nearly 2 hours they searched room after room. Most contained nothing useful. Then Cole noticed a locked storage area near the rear of the building. Unlike everything else around it, the lock looked relatively new. That is interesting, he said. Madison frowned. Why replace a lock in an abandoned facility? Together they examined the door. Attached beside the keypad was a small metal plate bearing a familiar symbol. The same symbol discovered inside the founder archive. Madison's pulse quickened. Open it. Several minutes later, the door unlocked. The room beyond was surprisingly clean. Shelves filled with boxes stretched from floor to ceiling. Computer servers occupied one corner. Most shocking of all, electricity still powered the equipment. Someone had been maintaining the room. Recently, Madison slowly opened the nearest box. Inside were hundreds of engineering records bearing Samuel Carter's signature. Patents, research notes, prototype designs, entire sections of company history. This is incredible, she whispered. Cole picked up a folder from another shelf. His expression changed immediately. Madison. She walked over. The document in his hands was not engineering research. It was legal paperwork, ownership agreements, stock allocations, financial records. Madison scanned the first page, then the second. Her face went pale. This cannot be right. According to the documents, Samuel Carter had once owned nearly half the company. Half. The silence in the room deepened. Every discovery pointed toward the same conclusion. Samuel had not been a forgotten employee. He had been an equal partner. Yet somebody had systematically removed him from history. Suddenly, a sound echoed from the hallway outside. A door closing. Both turned toward the entrance. Footsteps followed. Slow. Deliberate. Someone else was inside the building. And judging by the timing, that person knew exactly what they had just found. The footsteps grew louder, echoing through the abandoned research center with slow, deliberate rhythm. Madison Hayes instinctively tightened her grip on the folder containing Samuel Carter's ownership records. Across the room, Cole Bennett remained calm. Years of solving problems had taught him that panic rarely improved a situation. The footsteps stopped just outside the storage room. Silence followed. Then a familiar voice spoke. "I was hoping you would not find this place." Madison stared toward the doorway. Trevor Kane stepped into view. His suit looked strangely out of place inside the aging facility. Dust covered the floor around him, yet his shoes appeared untouched. He had been here before. Many times. The realization hit Madison immediately. "You knew about this room." Trevor sighed. "Of course I knew." His answer carried none of the nervousness she had seen before. In a strange way, he almost seemed relieved. The secret was finally out. Cole folded his arms. "You have been maintaining the servers." Trevor nodded. "For years." Madison looked around at the shelves of documents. "Why?" Trevor walked slowly into the room. "Because some truths destroy more than they fix." Madison shook her head. "That is not your decision to make." Trevor smiled sadly. "You think this is about greed." He gestured toward the records surrounding them. "It is not." The room fell quiet again. Outside, wind rattled loose branches against the side of the building. Trevor stepped closer to one of the shelves and removed a small leather folder. Unlike the others, it appeared frequently handled. He placed it on the table. "Read it." Madison hesitated before opening the folder. Inside were letters. Personal letters. Correspondence between Richard Hayes and Samuel Carter. She scanned the first few pages. Then her eyes widened. "What is this?" Trevor looked toward the dusty windows. The part of the story nobody wanted public. Madison continued reading. The letters revealed growing tension between the two founders during the company's final years. Disagreements. Arguments. Different visions for the future. Yet one letter stood out above all others. It had been written by Richard shortly before his death. Madison read the final paragraph twice to make sure she understood it correctly. "Samuel never betrayed me," she whispered. Trevor nodded. No. Cole stepped closer. "Then why was he erased?" Trevor pointed toward another document inside the folder. Madison unfolded it carefully. It was a legal settlement signed decades earlier. Her face slowly lost color as she read. The signatures belonged not only to company executives, but also to members of her own family. The truth arrived piece by piece. Samuel Carter had never sold his ownership. He had never abandoned the company. After Richard's death, a group of executives and family advisors had pushed him out through legal maneuvering and private agreements. They had rewritten the story. Then they had spent decades protecting it. Madison lowered the document. "My family knew." Trevor remained silent. He did not need to answer. The signatures answered for him. The room felt smaller suddenly. Heavier. Everything Madison believed about her inheritance was shifting beneath her feet. Then Cole noticed something else inside the folder. A sealed envelope addressed directly to the future CEO of Hayes Automotive. The handwriting belonged to Richard Hayes. Madison stared at it. The envelope had remained unopened for nearly 40 years. Her hands trembled slightly as she broke the seal. Whatever was inside had waited decades to be read. And somehow, everyone in the room knew that the contents were about to change everything. The envelope felt surprisingly heavy in Madison Hayes' hands. Dust from 4 decades clung to the edges of the paper as she carefully unfolded the letter inside. The abandoned research facility seemed to disappear around her. The shelves, the documents, even Trevor Kane standing across the room faded into the background. For a moment, there was only the handwriting of her grandfather, Richard Hayes, the man whose story had shaped her entire life. Madison began reading silently. Then she stopped. Her eyes moved back to the first paragraph. She read it again. Cole noticed the change in her expression immediately. "What is it?" Madison looked up slowly. There was no anger in her face. No shock. Only sadness. Deep sadness. He knew, she whispered. Trevor lowered his head. Yes. Madison continued reading. The letter revealed that Richard Hayes had discovered the efforts to push Samuel Carter out of the company shortly before his death. He had fought against it. He had written letters, requested meetings, tried to reverse the decisions. But his declining health had left him with little influence. The board ignored him. Family advisors convinced others to move forward. By the time he realized how far things had gone, it was too late. Madison swallowed hard. He spent his final months trying to fix it. Trevor nodded. That is why the archive existed. Cole looked toward the rows of preserved records. Suddenly everything made sense. The hidden compartment inside the prototype. The secret archive. The storage room. Richard had not hidden the truth from future generations. He had protected it. He had left breadcrumbs for someone honest enough to follow them. Madison reached the final page. A single sentence stood alone at the bottom. If you are reading this, choose truth over comfort. The room fell silent. Wind brushed against the building outside. Somewhere in the distance, an old ventilation system hummed softly. No one spoke. Some words deserved space. Eventually, Trevor broke. The silence. Now you understand why I wanted this buried. Madison folded the letter carefully. No. I understand why you were afraid. Trevor looked away. For years he had convinced himself he was protecting the company. Protecting employees. Protecting investors. But standing inside that room surrounded by evidence, even he could no longer pretend the secret served anyone except the lie itself. What happens now? He asked quietly. Madison looked at the boxes around her. Thousands of pages. Decades of hidden history. One decision would determine what happened next. Cole remained silent. He had never pushed her toward any choice. That was part of what made her trust him. He cared about truth, not control. Madison walked slowly through the room, running her fingers across the shelves. Every document represented someone who had been forgotten. Every folder represented a story erased from public memory. Finally, she stopped and looked back at the two men. We tell the truth. Trevor closed his eyes. Not in defeat. In acceptance. Somehow he had known this moment was coming. Cole smiled faintly. Quietly. Respectfully. Madison noticed. You expected that answer. Cole shrugged. I hoped for it. The following morning, news spread quickly across Hayes Automotive. An emergency shareholder meeting was announced. Board members were summoned. Legal teams prepared statements. Reporters gathered outside headquarters before sunrise. Everyone sensed something significant was coming. Yet among all the tension, Madison felt surprisingly calm. For the first time since finding the hidden compartment inside the prototype, she knew exactly what needed to happen. As she entered headquarters, employees watched her with curiosity. Some looked nervous, others hopeful. She passed through the lobby and stepped into a private elevator. Just before the doors closed, her phone buzzed. A message appeared from an unknown number. There was no greeting, no signature, only one sentence. You still have not found the most important file Samuel left behind. Madison stared at the screen. The elevator doors closed. And suddenly, the mystery was not over yet. Madison Hayes stared at the message. Throughout the elevator ride to the top floor, the words refused to leave her mind. You still have not found the most important file Samuel left behind. By the time the doors opened, reporters were already gathering outside headquarters. Board members filled conference rooms. Attorneys reviewed statements. The company stood hours away from the largest public announcement in its history. Yet somehow, the mystery was still unfinished. Madison immediately called Cole Bennett. 20 minutes later, they sat together in her office overlooking downtown Chicago. Morning sunlight reflected across the glass towers outside, but neither paid attention. Madison handed him the phone. Cole read the message twice. Who sent it? Unknown number. Do you believe it? Madison looked toward the stack of documents covering her desk. After everything we have found, yes. Cole nodded. Then Samuel wanted something discovered. They spent the next hour reviewing every record recovered from the research center. Thousands of pages. Hundreds of folders. Nothing. Then Cole noticed something unusual inside one of Samuel Carter's engineering notebooks. A sequence of numbers appeared repeatedly in the margins. Not calculations. Coordinates. Madison immediately recognized the location. The prototype. Cole looked up. The one from the gala? She nodded. Samuel designed part of it. Less than an hour later, they stood once again inside the Hayes Automotive Heritage Gallery. The building remained closed to the public. The prototype sat beneath bright showroom lights exactly where the mystery had begun. Madison walked slowly around the vehicle. "What are we looking for?" Cole smiled faintly. "The same thing we were looking for the first time. What everyone else missed." Silence settled across the gallery. The polished floor reflected the vehicle like a mirror. Cole carefully examined the interior. The dashboard, the seats, the center console. Then his eyes moved toward the driver's side door panel. Something caught his attention. A tiny engraving hidden beneath the trim. Samuel's initials. Madison. She joined him immediately. Together, they removed the panel. Behind it rested a small, waterproof envelope no larger than a notebook. Madison slowly opened it. Inside was a single flash drive. Nothing else. Her pulse quickened. Minutes later, they connected the drive to a secure company computer. One file appeared on the screen. Samuel's final statement. Madison opened it. A video began playing. An older man appeared. Calm eyes. Kind face. Samuel Carter. For a moment, nobody spoke. Even across decades, his presence felt genuine. "If you are watching this," Samuel began. Then the truth finally found its way home. The room grew silent. Samuel explained everything. He described building the company beside Richard Hayes. He described being forced out after Richard's death. Most surprisingly, he revealed that he never wanted revenge, never wanted lawsuits, never wanted public humiliation. He simply wanted future generations to know the truth. Then came the final revelation. Samuel had secretly donated his remaining ownership rights decades earlier to a charitable foundation supporting technical education for working-class families. He had walked away from wealth worth billions of dollars. Not because he lost, because he chose dignity over bitterness. When the video ended, neither Madison nor Cole spoke for several seconds. Finally, Madison whispered, "He gave everything away." Cole smiled. Some people measure success differently. Hours later, Madison stood before shareholders, executives, employees, and reporters. Cameras filled the auditorium. The entire industry watched. She told the truth. Every part of it. Samuel Carter's name was restored publicly. His contributions were recognized. The foundation received the ownership stake that rightfully belonged to him. When the announcement ended, the room stood and applauded. Not for Madison, not for the company, for the truth. Later that evening, after the reporters left and the cameras disappeared, Madison found Cole preparing to return home. "You never asked for anything," she said. Cole shrugged. "I already have a daughter who thinks I can fix anything. That is enough." Madison laughed softly. Then she looked at him for a long moment. "You know, I was joking that day at the gala." Cole smiled. "I know." Madison stepped closer, her eyes warm with respect rather than teasing. "The funny thing is, after everything that happened, the part that surprises me most is not the mystery." "What is it?" She smiled. "Meeting the mechanic who reminded an entire company what integrity looks like." For a moment, neither spoke. The city lights shimmered beyond the windows. The mystery was over. The truth had been restored. And the silence that followed was not empty. It was the quiet sound of dignity finally receiving the respect it deserved.